Who was Methuselah? Who was he really, and what do the texts say? Methuselah, Noah's grandfather, is considered to be the longest living man in history and is said to have lived for 969 years until the great flood covered the earth. But this biblical character is fascinating not only for his longevity, it's also very important for many other reasons. According to Genesis 5:21-27, Methuselah was the eighth forerunner patriarch, son of Enoch, father of Lamech, and grandfather of Noah, who was the last of these patriarchs, whom he acquired at the age of 187. Methuselah's name has become synonymous with elderly people who reach or even exceed 100 years of age. A careful reading of the Old Testament reveals that Methuselah died in the year of the Great Flood. However, three manuscript traditions, the Masoretic, the Septuagint, and the Samaritan Torah, offer different time intervals. The Masoretic, an authoritative Hebrew and Aramaic text by Tanakh on Rabbinic Judaism, states that Methuselah was 187 years old when his son was born and that he died in the year of the flood at the age of 969. The Septuagint, sometimes referred to as the Greek Old Testament, the oldest Greek translation of the Old Testament from the original Hebrew text, disagrees on only one point, that Methuselah died 6 years before the Great Flood. According to the Samaritan Torah, a text in the first 5 books of the Hebrew Scriptures written in the Samaritan alphabet used by the Samaritans, Methuselah was 67 years old when his son was born and died at the age of 720 in the years of the Great Flood. These discrepancies in the ancient texts have been explained in many ways, with the obvious mistakes being made by the copyists and translators. In fact, some errors may be due to attempts to correct previous errors. But despite the fact that there are differences in the dates, one thing remains the same. Methuselah lived beyond the life expectancy of ordinary people. So what can this mean? Was not Methuselah a human being? How is it possible for a human being on earth to be able to live for 969 years or so? Very hard. There is, however, something that could make this possible. If we take a look at another ancient text from the Sumerians, the so-called King's List, we will find that they refer to kings who lived here on our planet Earth for even more than 1,000 years. In Eridu, for example, Alulim became king and ruled for 28,800 years, Al-Aljar for 36,000 years. The Sumerian kingdom list describes 8 kings who ruled the earth for a total of 241,200 years. These quote-unquote people had, quote, come down from heaven, and quote, all the way through their lives to the time of the Great Flood, which swept everything on earth. This kingdom continued even after the flood, only the lifespan of the kings began to decline, and declined slowly, approaching the familiar average life expectancy that we have today. Despite this fact, as described in the ancient Sumerian column, the King's List, at the same time we find from various historical sources that ordinary everyday people on our planet did not live for hundreds or even thousands of years. According to James W. Vopel, an American scientist in the field of aging research, biotechnology, and official demography, life expectancy began to rise in 1840 with a decline in child mortality and mortality in general, and in fact continues to increase every half year approximately for every decade. But again, it's far from the years of Methuselah and the Sumerian kings. Our current knowledge of the lifespan of the cell leads us to assume that the natural limit of longevity in humans is less than 150 years. The Guinness World Record for the longest human lifespan is that of Jean Calment of France, who lived between 1875 and 1997, who lived to the age of 122 years old and 164 days. Some writers believe that human beings lived for almost 1,000 years, so God shortened that time, according to Genesis 6:3. But was it really an act of God, the fact that human life was reduced? Or is there another more outrageous explanation, which suggests that in the days of Methuselah, non-earth beings were walking on our planet? Many argue that the first chapters of the Bible are mere copies of older Babylonian or Sumerian texts. Was Methuselah then a descendant of those kings who lived for thousands of years and are mentioned in the kings list? And what can be the relationship of all this with the Anunnaki, the gods who are claimed to have come from somewhere else and created man or interfered with human DNA? Questions to be answered. This I've translated for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.